Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune. We are at Soldier Field in adjacent suites atop Soldier Field next to the press box. And we are sitting here just hours after the Bears survived their opener against the Titans, 24-17, a comeback victory. They came from a long way down, Dan, but it is 1-0. That is the bottom line. We can spend all week interpreting it. In some ways, for us, it's the ideal game because the Bears win. People are still enthusiastic, but there is so much to pick apart.
Yeah, first of all, for our audience watching this on the YouTube page, you can see that David found a little bit more shade than I did. I am staring into the blinding setting sun here at Soldier Field. But this win today, David, was one that was truly invigorating for those guys inside the locker room. You felt it as soon as you walked in there post game. This was a team that was down 17-0 with really nothing going their way late in the first half, somehow clawed back to win this game without scoring an offensive touchdown, without reaching 150 net yards of offense. And I had someone say to me on the way into the locker room, do you now feel like you've had the opportunity to cover a Lovie Smith football team? Because that's what this felt like on a new day for Chicago Bears quarterbacking history. We got an old school victory from the Bears with some special teams playmaking and some defensive tenacity.
Well, that's exactly the way that I viewed it. I covered every one of Lovie Smith's games on the Bears sidelines, and this was reminiscent of many of those, especially those in 2005 and 2006. Year 3 of Lovie, year 3 of Matt Eberflus. They're very similar things to look at and parallels to draw. It's natural if you're a Bears fan. So, at 670score.com, I just filed a column and said, for all the talk around town about a new era, the Bears' first victory of 2024 sure looked old and familiar. And it did, because 3 fourth quarter turnovers. Yeah. You look at the opportunistic way what they did with those takeaways. Tyreek Stevenson, Levis throws him the ball, but he doesn't just catch it. He runs it back. They have special teams contributing. So you have an offense that was very 2006-ish. You had a defense and special teams that carried the day, and you survive with a victory, and you feel almost like empowered by it, because you feel like if you can win on a day like this, you can win on many days, because you always can travel your defense and your special teams.
I thought TJ Edwards said it best in the locker room, David. He said, good teams find a way. And the Bears found a way today. Obviously, it's an inferior opponent that gave them a bunch of gifts, but they capitalized on those gifts. We talk about the offensive struggles. We're going to talk about them all week, because we'll go back through the tape the next couple of days, and we'll see a group that was completely disjointed, a quarterback that was never comfortable. I can't remember a game where I left the post-game interviews not really having much to discuss about a single play that the quarterback made or didn't make. No turnovers for Caleb Williams. The most memorable play of the afternoon is probably the 18-yard sack he took after the Bears took over possession in Titans territory. It was a day today, David, where the Bears took over 3 possessions on the plus side of midfield and only managed to squeeze 2 field goals out of those possessions. You can't have that happen, but you still get out of here with a win because of what we mentioned. There was validation here today, I think, of the culture that's been building here, of the belief and the unity that's there, of we've all got each other's back. And as Matt Eberflus said after the game, this team looked at each other in the locker room at halftime and said, we've got this, and that's reminiscent of that 2006 game in Arizona in week 6, where despite how ugly everything was through the first half, there was never any panic. There was never any false manufactured, as DeMarcus Walker called it, a hoo-ah speech that someone had to make. You just went back to work. You did your job every single play, and you trusted that someone was going to make a big play to turn the tide.
It was a day when the so-called generational quarterback reminded you of too many quarterbacks of this generation for the Bears. He was nondescript. He was ineffective. He was a guy that really didn't have a positive impact on the game. The operation was okay. It wasn't great. The poise was missing. That's the most human I've seen Caleb Williams look since he referenced it USC Notre Dame last year when he was terrible. And people wanted to point to that as why he can't play and why he can't do this. I think that was a mistake then, and it would be a mistake now to let one game dictate too much of what your expectations are for a young man who we put a lot of hope in or invested a lot of hope in moving forward. So they need to clean things up. But I do think the overwhelming first impression is that this defense has been together a while now. They play like a group that understands each other and plays for each other. And if Hard Knocks were doing an episode from this game, they would start it at halftime with whatever
Yeah.
was said and however they looked in each other's eyes, as Matt Eberflus said, and they would show that shot, and you'd see that resolved.
Second half shutout, I think they gave up 65 yards in the second half. I mean, that's a dominant performance there by the Bears defense. You get the 3 takeaways, the Jalen Johnson interception to seal it. You obviously had a Darrell Taylor strip sack, which was a big play in the moment. And as you mentioned a couple minutes ago, the Tariq Stevenson pick 6 that provided the game-winning touchdown. That play seemed to be unfolding from the press box in slow motion. And Tariq Stevenson verified that from his vantage point, it also seemed like it was in slow motion because Will Levis says DeMarcus Walker wrapped around his waist, and in an effort to get the ball away and try to take an incomplete pass instead of a third down sack, he tried to do a Jay Cutler thing and heave it sort of sidearm, underhanded, slingshot, shoveled it. I know Jay was in the building today. We'll get to that in a minute. And Tariq was just standing there. He said he almost froze when the ball landed in his hands because it was just like, really? This is it? And then he took off and raced the end zone. Little piece of trivia for you. Tariq Stevenson said that was his first pick 6 at any level. Had never had one in college, had never had one in high school. He got one today, kept the football, and that's going to be a memorable football to keep in his collection.
It's a game-winning touchdown. It's a game-winning touchdown for a team that, scored on defense. They held on defense. They had the special teams touchdown with the block punt by Daniel Hardy, and then Jonathan Owens. He vaults into the end zone. All these things, he was very, very opportunistic, and you keep on waiting for the offense to get it. And the offense they never got it. They didn't run the ball well. They had a rotation at right guard. I think Coleman Shelton was obvious for the wrong reasons. You saw him getting manhandled too often, and I don't think anything else. The other thing I noticed about Braxton Jones was one time he jumped, right? He had a penalty, and Darnell Wright, the only time I noticed him was when they started the first snap of the game. He was on unbalanced line. He's lined up on the left side. Offensive line really was nondescript. This was a terrible offensive effort for Shane Waldron's first game.
The correction tape is going to be plentiful this week, and that's on all 3 phases for sure. The offense is going to have the bulk of those. Keenan Allen drops what would be a, really sort of a soothing touchdown late in the first half when the Bears were trying to climb out of that early 17-point hole. Caleb puts an out route right in his hands. A 13-year veteran making a lot of money. He needs to catch that football and doesn't. They settle for a field goal there. That's a correction that needs to be made. A couple minutes before that, Montez Sweat, your highest paid defensive player, jumps offside on 3rd and 5, gives the Titans new life. They end up turning that into a touchdown. You had Velus Jones trying to catch a kickoff, dropping it, and then kicking it 20 yards ahead for the Titans to land on and recover. There were some massive mistakes that the Bears aren't going to be able to get away with in future weeks. To their credit, they found the resilience today. They found the belief. They found that timely playmaking. And I'm sure you would agree that blocked punt by Daniel Hardy was really the detonation here inside Soldier Field for a crowd that was just waiting for something to cheer for. They were enlivened and they were energized before the game started, and then we're 90 minutes into the football game and nothing of a positive nature has happened, and that play seemed to be everything that awakened the entire building.
That play, you're right. It was like somebody pushed a button and kind of woke people up. It was like the alarm clock going off or your smoke alarm. Like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? Because the people had fallen asleep after the Velus Jones fumble. I want to ask you this. Matt Eberflus was asked after the game about confidence in Velus Jones now, and all he said was, I'm proud of him because of the way that he came back and carried the ball. What's this future hold? Because, Dan, you know this better than I do. Nothing unifies Bears fans more than complaining about Velus Jones. And this will be topic number 2 on the morning radio show at 5:30. Whenever we start taking calls on the Mully and Haugh show, people want to know, A, what's wrong with Caleb Williams? B, what's wrong with Velus Jones, and why is he still on the team?
I did say to Colleen Kane after the game that it was truly refreshing to be able to bounce around the locker room and talk to a bunch of guys who made the game winning plays instead of having to spend so much time in a potential game losing play like that, right? Like we've had so many experiences where that would have been the day's story and we would have been stuck there in front of Velus's locker, listening to him explain away his latest mistake and telling us that God has a plan and you just got to go with what God's plan is. I don't know how long God stayed up last night working on that part of the plan, because that seems like something that shouldn't be in the playbook at this point, David. This is a guy that needs to make more game-winning contributions than game-losing mistakes. And we're on year 3 of this, of enduring some of these huge blunders. I mean, that's catching a football. Like that's as unforced of a mistake as you're going to be able to have. Obviously, DeAndre Carter gets football later in the game and returns a kickoff 67 yards to set up the Bears' first score. You can't keep going down that road. You just can't. I wouldn't be surprised if Velus Jones was inactive. Tyler Scott was up next week, because I just don't know how you continue to put him in the field. What were his numbers offensively? You have 2 carries, maybe?
Not good enough, but I advocated for keeping him, and I like him as a running back, but you can't take that chance if you're a playoff
2 carries
team.
for 11 yards. That's not worth it.
It's nondescript. Yeah, and look, leave the kicking at Soldier Field to Mr. Santos and the Chicago Fire. You can't muff a kick return and then boot it away. It's just ridiculous to have him in a position where they have to count on him because you hold your breath. So Matt Eberflus, I guess to his credit, said, because he's not this kind of a coach. There's some coaches have been like, okay, he's make it clear that he's gonna have a hard time staying on this team. He said he was proud of him because he returned to it. I guess it took some resolve. I would not put him in position again to hurt the team.
Yeah, this isn't high school football. Resolve is not worth betting on when the guy can't catch the football. Like, the hands and the ball security is a problem. It's what loses you football games. This team it has an opportunity to go chase down a playoff berth. You heard me on our last episode say that the Bears are going to be playing postseason football this year. They're not going to be if you make game-losing mistakes in big moments like that. And so you can't afford that. You've got too good of a roster and too much at stake to keep going down that path. I would not be shocked if we walk into to Houston next week and Velus Jones is on the inactive list, 90 minutes before Sunday Night Football starts. So
do you think that, I guess we'll get into this more on Monday in our live pod, 6 to 7 on 670score.com. We're going to do Take the North live. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll address a lot of these issues tomorrow, but this is our reaction. My reaction to you, Dan, is how do you think they responded to Caleb Williams' poor showing? Because again, this was not anything we saw in preseason. And for those of us who have extolled his virtues, it was a shocker to see him look so ordinary and look so rattled and to look like a rookie that we didn't think he was capable of looking like.
Yeah, it was ugly. I'm going to pull up a sequence in my notebook that I highlighted today because it was like Caleb converted his first third down early in the second quarter with just a beautiful timing and rhythm dart to DJ Moore, 12 yards, chains moving. You go, okay, maybe this is what wakes him up. Here's what happens on the next 5 snaps. You've got Kari Blasingame missing a block and then a wide open play action shot being disrupted because a defender is able to hit Caleb Williams' arm for a pass that doesn't get there. Then you take a delay a game. Then there's another pass batted down. Then there's the Braxton Jones false start penalty that you mentioned. And then there's a huge 10-yard sack that pushes them further back, and they have to punt from deep in their own territory. That was like, whoa, you get a 1 step forward and then 5 steps back. And it felt like that was kind of the case a lot of the afternoon here, where nothing was in rhythm. Caleb wasn't in rhythm. Shane Waldron didn't seem to be in rhythm. The receivers didn't seem to be in rhythm. Everything seemed disjointed, and they're going to have to work on that. And they're going to have to figure that out. Look, we knew that this was going to be a work in progress offense in the month of September. Didn't expect it to look this bad. You didn't expect them to struggle to get to 150 total yards. They never got there. Caleb Williams, I think, finished 14 of 29 for 93 yards. Took the 2 sacks for 29 yards. That's too much sack yardage for 2 sacks. And then obviously the one bright spot is he didn't turn the football over. And in a game like this, the only way you're going to have a chance is if your quarterback takes care of the football. It's the only positive thing I can say about the performance today, other than that Caleb seemed to be pretty steady post-game and understanding how ineffective he was, how much work there is to be done, and thankful for the guys around him who let him walk out of this building tonight with a victory.
His demeanor was exceptional. His demeanor was professional and veteran-like, and somebody who that part of the game you cannot criticize. All right, let's bring in Studs to give away our game balls. We've got a couple of 3-word submissions as well. We can get to, you guys have the 797 3-word submissions, I think, and Studs wants to get through all of them tonight, but we want to get out of here. So
that'll be a separate episode.
On a separate episode of Take the North. All right, Adam. So game balls. Let's start with you. What did you think, and who gets the game ball?
Okay, so first of all, I actually want to give a quick shout out to Dan. So this was Dan's blurb in the Chicago Tribune about how this game is going to go. Dan Wiederer's prediction for this game: Caleb Williams will be victorious in his first NFL start, only furthering the imagination and Florida Giddy fans who see their talented rookie as the long-awaited franchise QB to take them on a long joyride of success. But true to the optimal formula, this won't be Williams-driven win. Running back DeAndre Swift will have a big afternoon. You were a little off on that. However, the defense will collect 3 takeaways, ding, including Jalen Johnson interception, ding, and Williams will learn an important lesson that with this team around him, he rarely will have to do it all himself. Bears win 23-16. You were off just a little bit on the final score, but man,
that's awesome.
Nailed it.
That's why you got to come to Take the North for that kind of insight. Wow, that's pretty close.
I've actually already gotten some texts from buddies asking me why I couldn't have put that in their inbox sooner. They obviously don't follow me in the Chicago Tribune or on Twitter closely enough to get that information. They thought they could have capitalized on that. So thanks for the kudos. I like it.
So
yeah, right, so Dan problem. Gets a game ball. Dan gets a game ball from Adam. Who else gets a game ball from Adam?
Okay, I actually am going to give my actual game ball to Darrell Taylor, who had a great game with 2 sacks. He had 8 total tackles, 7 of them solo, and had a huge impact on the game. And I think really showed you why Ryan Poles chose to go out and make a trade for him. I don't expect him to have that kind of game every week. Obviously, he was going against a rookie left tackle today, so that does help his cause a little bit. But he was awesome today, and a big reason.
High first-round draft pick.
A top 10 pick. Yeah, he was great. I'm not trying to take much away from him, but just adding a little context. Yeah, Darrell Taylor gets my game ball. He was great today.
David, I'm going to give a shared game ball here, and I'm going to give it to Daniel Hardy and Jonathan Owens, because I think that play was the play that turned the entire tide here. Not only did Hardy get home and get his I think it was his left hand on Ryan Stonehouse's punt, but Jonathan Owens had the wherewithal to locate the football, scoop it, and score, because we know that this offense, the way it was playing today, might have settled for a field goal if they had merely dove on the football. And so that was a big scoop and score by Jonathan Owens. I also want to just give some commendation to Daniel Hardy, who earned his way onto this roster. And you heard from DeMarcus Walker in the locker room after today's game the amount of pride that his fellow defensive linemen have, and a guy who busted his tail through training camp to earn a roster spot and then didn't take a breath, came into the football game today, knew what his role was going to be on special teams, and found a way to impact the game. Those are winning players, right? And when you start to build a culture that has those guys in it, all of a sudden you start to get the plays that create the victories that take you to new levels. Daniel Hardy, Jonathan Owens, kudos for that play that woke the Bears up at a time when they badly needed to make a play.
Okay, I will go then to the obvious, I think, because without Tyreek Stevenson realizing that, oh, wait, I've never done a pick 6 before, but I better run to the end zone, we may still be playing. I mean, they definitely had a defense that was responsive, opportunistic, tempted to say John Hoke, the secondary coach, but a lot of credit goes to a Bears coaching staff to get the secondary was impactful from day one, the way that everyone said they would be. They lived up to the hype. Caleb Williams did not today. That doesn't mean anything except for he had one bad game. We're going to spend all week weighing the overreaction and how accurate it is or how appropriate it is. But you cannot overstate the impactfulness, the impact of the Bears secondary. Tyreek Stevenson gets my game ball for the game-winning 43-yard pick 6.
I asked both Tyreek Stevenson and DeMarcus Walker if they were surprised the moment that Will Levis decided to throw that football. Tyreek said, I'm still surprised right now that he threw the football. And DeMarcus Walker said, I'm sure he regrets that right now. Just take the sack, son. And that's probably what the headline is going to be in Nashville on Monday morning. Just take the sack, son, because if Will Levis had that one to do all over again, I think he would understand that with the game flow, you're better off taking the sack, letting your punter come out, send a punt away, and leaning on your defense to continue shutting down the Bears.
Well, it reminded some people like yourself, before we get out of here, of one Jay Cutler, good old number 6, who was a friend of the program and remains a friend of the program. All right, so quickly, I'll tell you my elevator story post-game. I'll tell us in the morning again on the Mully and Haugh Show, 5:30 to 10. So I'm getting into the elevator. You get on the first one because you were really in a hurry to get down there. I'm in the second press elevator. Mike Wilbon, who I've known for years, is there in a Caleb Williams jersey. He's a big Chicago Bears fan. He's great to see Wilbon. Wilbon gets off on the first level, the first stop at C1. On comes Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler, who I haven't seen in a couple years. I was actually happy to see him. More surprisingly, he looked happy to see me. We shook hands.
Well, he probably had 7 or 8 pops before he came on that elevator.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, we had a good talk on the way down the elevator. We walked through the tunnel down to where I had to cut off and go to the interview room. Shook hands, said goodbye. Jay Cutler, enjoying life, enjoying TV, had some good thoughts on the Bears, on what they did today. Caleb Williams, big fan that hasn't really met him. Also gets to know a lot about the Nashville scene, so he knew the Tennessee Titans well. But it was good to see Jay Cutler. How many times and how many people do you know who would say that?
Rarely have I heard that. And alumni weekend here. So Jay was here as part of that. The Bears also, as a little footnote today, honored Steve McMichael at halftime of the opener today. He was presented with his Pro Football Hall of Fame ring, obviously not in attendance, but represented by his wife, Misty. Nice speech by Mike Singletary at halftime. So good to see Mongo get that adoration in front of the Soldier Field faithful here today. But yeah, Cuddy, look, that's a fun elevator interaction. And maybe that's a new segment for the Take the North pod. If we can continue to run into people in elevators, maybe we'll have a recurring segment about elevator interactions, because that one's going to be hard to top, but I think we're going to try.
All I know is last year, the season opener, I spotted Simone Biles, okay? And you weren't there. And now I see Wilbon and Jay Cutler. I am on the elevator beat forever. So I am fine with that designation. I had a good time. All right.
Are you willing to come to Houston and maybe have an encounter with JJ Watt or something next week?
I would love to go to Houston. I like that building. It was before I first learned how to Uber.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We'll tell that story later this week.
I love that story. Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay, we'll do that. We need to get out of here. We're going to do the live Take the North broadcast on Monday night, 6 to 7 on The Score. You can still find us on the free Odyssey app. You can still watch us on 670 Scores YouTube page. For Adam Sadzinski, who gave Dan Wiederer a game ball. For Dan Wiederer, I'm David Haugh. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.